The films we love is a subjective thing and will always ignite debate. One person can love a film for whatever reason, when another can simply hate it. But one thing that we can all agree on is that films evoke specific feelings for better or for worse, but I want to concentrate on those films that make you feel good, that gives you a wholesome feeling by the end and allows you to reflect upon not only the film you've just watched, but the wider world around you. And feeling good about a film is a positive form of escapism that is very important, especially in trying times. So here at the Critical Cinema Club, we've selected 5 feel-good films that are well worth your time. In at number 5 is an early 90s comedy that, once again, flirts with the Western genre, because I simply can't stay away from Westerns, but is full of heart and adventure. And that is 1991's City Slickers, starring Billy Crystal. Crystal plays Mitch Robbins, a man who turns 39 and finds himself in the midst of a midlife crisis, being only a year away from the Big 4-0. He hates his job buying radio advertisement, his kids seem embarrassed by him, and he's always on a downer. He feels miserable. Life is beginning to pass him by and he feels lost, not knowing what can make him happy. He and his 2 friends and their wives regularly go on adventure holidays together, doing things that many would be envious of, but for Mitch, these adventures seldom seem to excite him. He feels that life is beginning to have no meaning. Mitch needs something to give him a lift and reluctantly agrees to go on a cattle driving holiday from New Mexico to Colorado with his 2 best friends, Phil and Ed, played by Daniel Stern and Bruno Kirby respectively. It is Mitch's wife Barbara who hopes that he will find his smile. This is an adventure that takes many twists and turns throughout the journey. Mitch and his friends are ill prepared for what awaits them, having to become real cowboys within a 2-week holiday. But it's not just the elements that Mitch has to contend with, but it's also the rough and ready cowboys, including the grizzled Curly, played by Jack Palance, that Mitch needs to be wary of, mainly due to his own sarcastic and quick-witted nature. Mitch's arc in City Slickers might be an obvious one. A man struggling to find satisfaction within his life goes outside of his comfort zone to rediscover himself, but it's done in such a satisfying way. The film is well paced with plenty of laughs. I do believe that Billy Crystal also ad-libbed some of his funniest lines.
Hello. Ooh, rough corral.
The friendship between the 3 main leads, although strong from the outset, gets tested and re-galvanised. But it's a different kind of bond that is at the heart of the story. Not only with the friendship that blooms between Mitch and Curly, but between Mitch and a newborn calf, Norman. And this really does pull on the old heartstrings. The film also features a young Jake Gyllenhaal and Supergirl. If this film doesn't pull on your heartstrings towards the end, then consider yourself dead inside. And it certainly is a feel-good film well worth your time. Our number 4 pick is a fish out of water film where the fish out of water switches from one character to another halfway through the film. And this is 1986's Crocodile Dundee. Starring Paul Hogan as the titular Michael J. Crocodile Dundee, who has become a kind of folklore figure, with American journalist Sue Charlton travelling to Walkabout Creek in Australia to learn more about the legend, only to find out that the legends are somewhat exaggerated, or so we are led to believe. Sue's first encounter with Mick Dundee doesn't quite meet her expectations. The legend goes that Dundee was attacked by and killed a crocodile which took half of his leg, with Dundee crawling hundreds of miles across the bush to safety. Sue arrives at the local bar in the outback town of Walkabout Creek, greeted by Dundee's friend and business partner, Wally. Dundee himself arrives at the bar with 2 legs and a brash but playful demeanour. The truth doesn't quite live up to the legend. Dundee is willing to take Sue to the site of the attack, and the pair travel into the bush. No pun intended there, by the way.
Dirty.
Here, Sue is out of the depth being a city girl from New York and starts seeing that the legend of Mick Crocodile Dundee may not be as far from the truth as she might have thought. Dundee is highly accomplished and a skilled bushman. Again, no pun intended here.
You dirty fecker.
He is in his element when he's out in the wild. Then comes the shift with the fish out of water, where Sue decides to bring Dundee back to New York as part of her story that she's writing on him.
Jesus Christ.
Here, Mick is so far out of his element that he sticks out like a sore thumb. Seeing him navigate the new world around him is comedy gold, and a romantic connection between Sue and Mick blossoms throughout the film. Being a man who lives an almost alien lifestyle to those in the big city makes the fish out of water comedy even more funny. Paul Hogan's comedy timing is utterly brilliant. It's almost like he stepped through a time warp. Crocodile Dundee is a funny, adventurous and charming film, with a love story being the backbone of the story. It's entertaining and is the type of film that they simply just don't make anymore, which is why this is a feel-good film well worth your time.
That's a knife.
Our number 3 pick is a film that deals with real-life events that culminates with a truly heartfelt moment that was actually broadcast live on television in the UK. A film about a man who tried to move heaven and earth in order to save the lives of hundreds of children at the outbreak of the Second World War from Czechoslovakia. And that film is One Life. The story is told in 2 different time frames. In the late 80s with Nicky Winton, now retired, played by Anthony Hopkins, and in the months leading up to the Second World War with a young Nicky Winton played by Johnny Flynn. The film focuses on the struggles of Nicky trying his best to evacuate hundreds of children and find new homes in the safety of England. But once he has done all he can, he lives the next 50 years feeling guilty that he couldn't do more, nor did he know the fate of most of the children that he was able to save. Not until he's invited onto a television programme called That's Life. And it's here where we get a real heartfelt moment. Although this isn't a spoiler as such, because it's pretty much what the whole film is centred on, and was broadcast live in the UK, but Nicky is introduced to many of the children that he helped to save. He sat in the audience, surrounded by many that were saved, now grown up, and learning that they all went on to live healthy, fulfilling lives, all because of Nicky. When I went to see this in the cinema, I'll admit that this scene brought a tear to my eye, and quite a lot of other people sat in the same screening, including my wife. It was a truly heartfelt moment. Nicky Winton is a true hero of the Second World War, and his story is told to perfection in this film that boasts an excellent cast that includes Helena Bonham Carter, Lena Olin and Jonathan Pryce. This is a fascinating true story that would move even the most stoic of people, and is most certainly a feel-good film well worth your time. In at number 2 is one of my favourite films of all time, and I would bet that most people have actually seen this film, but I wanted to include it anyway. A fictional story about an incredible man who witnesses many key moments throughout the 20th century and almost indirectly and inadvertently affects certain big events, with the story literally told from his perspective. A man with a low IQ but a big heart. And that film is, of course, Forrest Gump. Starring Tom Hanks as the titular character and directed by Robert Zemeckis, Forrest Gump was adapted from the 1986 book of the same name by author Winston Groom. Gump sits on a bench waiting for a bus and tells his life story to anyone who's willing to listen. His view of the world is simple yet honest, and his life is full of adventure. Well, to most people his life would be extraordinary, but to Forrest it's just normal. Forrest starts off trying to remember his earliest memories of his childhood and struggles with his physical health. Due to a curvature of the spine, he has to wear braces on his legs to walk. Not only does he have a physical disability, he also has a mental disability due to his lower than average IQ. This meant that Forrest wasn't considered normal during a time when such things really weren't accepted in society. Yet none of this ever seemed to faze Forrest. Due to his good nature and lack of understanding, he was willing to live his life carefree and overcome some pretty big obstacles. The first of which was his physical disability with his spine, which ended up strengthening to the point where Forrest could not only walk normally, but run. And run he did. Forrest continues his story, covering some pretty significant moments in American history during the 20th century. He inspired Elvis Presley's dance moves. He gets a college scholarship playing American football, eventually meeting President John F. Kennedy at the White House after being named in the All-American team.
I believe he said he had to go pee.
He serves in the army during the Vietnam War and forms a friendship with fellow soldier Benjamin Buford Bubba Blue. He saves the lives of many of his company, including Lieutenant Dan Taylor, whilst trying to save his friend Bubba, but ultimately fails in a moment that really does pull on the heartstrings. One of many moments that had that effect on me in this film. Gump is awarded the Medal of Honor by President Lyndon B. Johnson and inadvertently appears at an anti-war march at the Washington Memorial. After the war, he plays ping pong. A lot of ping pong, or table tennis as we call it in the UK. And Forrest never takes his eye off the ball.
Never, ever take your eye off the ball.
He meets John Lennon on the Dick Cavett Show, inadvertently exposes the Watergate scandal, and becomes a shrimp boat captain, fulfilling a promise to his fallen friend, Bubba. Along the way, he forms a bond and friendship with his former commander, Lieutenant Dan Taylor, who is bitter and angry due to the loss of his legs in the war, and the fact that he felt that he was supposed to die in the war, like many of his family before him. Forrest becomes a millionaire and invests in Apple computers, sharing his wealth with Bubba's family. An incredible life to say the least, but all of this is centered around the one thing that he does hold most dear. Well, one person, with the exception of his mum, played by Sally Field, and that is the love for his oldest friend, Jenny. Jenny is a troubled character, suffering abuse as a child and living a life of self-destruction. Although kind-hearted towards Forrest, her life is almost opposite.
We have very different lives, you know.
Forrest goes through life unwittingly achieving many positive things and getting the best out of life. Jenny achieves very little and gets the worst things, some of which is of her own doing. Yet Forrest never stops loving Jenny. Jenny seems to enter and exit Forrest's life at intervals, with Jenny being the only thing in the world that he truly wants. It's almost as though they are drawn together. All of the achievements and experiences in Forrest's life pales in comparison to his love for Jenny. You could argue that Forrest is an unreliable narrator, as the story is told from his perspective, and that it can be exaggerated, with Forrest being a bit of a dreamer, but I guess this is just open to interpretation. Forrest Gump is a truly amazing film. It almost has everything. The comedy moments are very funny, the sad moments are very sad, and it is a captivating film with an excellent soundtrack to boot. It spawned some epic lines and catchphrases.
Life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.
Run, Forrest, run!
And big old fat Rain. Lieutenant Dan, you got new legs.
And even had a real chain of seafood restaurants in America, one of which my wife and I have been to. Forrest Gump is a truly heartfelt film that certainly fits the bill as a feel-good movie and is most certainly worth your time. And in at number 1 is a coming-of-age comedy that I randomly stumbled across and was one of those films that I couldn't stop thinking about and dissecting in my head for a while after my first viewing. It's an independent film by Kong Skull Island director Jordan Vogt Roberts, about 3 teenage friends who want to escape the shackles of their parents and live throughout the summer in the woods with no responsibilities and no rules. They are the kings of their own domain. And this film is The Kings of Summer. Joe Toy, played by Nick Robinson, finds his dad to be a bit overbearing and controlling. Joe wants his freedom and decides to escape to a clearing in the woods that he finds with his friend Patrick. Patrick has also had enough of his irritating parents and is more than happy to join Joe, along with a weird kid called Biagio, who just decides to tag along because why not? They decide to build a house in the woods, free from overbearing parents, rules and responsibilities. They're going to live off the land, answering to no one but themselves. The boys are reported missing to the police, but Joe's dad Frank, played by Nick Offerman, believes Joe to be taunting him. The 3 boys form a close bond and enjoy living in the woods, completely carefree. However, friendships and bonds are tested to breaking point when Joe invites the girl that he fancies to the house. Kelly then takes a liking to Patrick, which obviously doesn't go down well with Joe. Tensions mount to the point where the 2 best friends have a major falling out. I won't go too much further into the narrative here because I don't really want to spoil the film for anyone who hasn't seen it. But The Kings of Summer is a film that is full of charm, humour, and is really refreshing. The bond that develops between the friends whilst they are getting to grips with their new life, free from the modern world, is great to watch, and it ignites feelings of nostalgia with my own childhood when wanting to be rebellious and standing on my own 2 feet with your closest friends, and that felt exciting. There's a real brotherhood within the trio. The performances are great, and the exchanges between the 3 is the glue that holds it all together. There are some really heartfelt moments, and it does feel a bit heartbreaking when the friendship between Joe and Patrick is tested to its limit, all because of a girl. And not any girl, but Starlight. Moses Arias is the comedy relief of the film, and his place within the trio is crucial. He is the outsider, getting to know both Joe and Patrick, something that I could pretty much relate to as I moved to a new town in my teenage years and had to form friendships with a group that had been close friends with each other for years before. There is a sense of adventure with the boys living away from society, closed off from the world. a sense of excitement that they are the masters of their own destiny. And when things do take a turn, you hope for a happy conclusion, and I would argue that you certainly do get that, but maybe the ending should be discussed in a different video just to avoid spoilers. The Kings of Summer almost took me back to my teenage years. The transition from childhood to adulthood is always a tough one, but the togetherness of the best friends feels like a problem shared is a problem halved. I would highly recommend this coming of age film, but would state that it's not the Goonies, it's not the Explorers, and it's not Stand By Me. It's his own thing and is most certainly a feel-good film, well worth your time. And that's our list. What feel-good films would you recommend, and what do you think to our choices? By all means, let us know in the comments. I've been Colin from the Critical Cinema Club, and I'll catch you in the next video.